It began as a secret no one was supposed to see, an anomaly buried deep in the raw spectrographic files of the James Webb Space Telescope. Not a comet, not an asteroid, not even a star's dying flare. Something else, something deliberate. 3I Atlas, already notorious for breaking every rule of cometary behavior, suddenly revealed itself as far larger, stranger, and more deliberate than anyone imagined. A perfectly symmetrical halo of carbon dioxide, a body nearly 46 kilometers wide, and signals pulsing in prime number sequences, mathematics written in light. And perhaps most unsettling of all, long silences between bursts, as if the object itself was waiting for an answer. Tonight, I will take you through the science, the secrecy, and the haunting question at the heart of it all. What if we are no longer the observers, but the observed? Welcome to Velocity of Comets. Tonight, I want to take you on a journey into the heart of one of the most mysterious discoveries of our time. An object that defies categories, challenges physics, and whispers questions none of us are prepared to answer. Its name is 3I Atlas, and though we first logged it like any other visitor from the stars, it has since grown into something far more unsettling. Let me begin where the story truly starts. In the quiet halls of data processing centers, where astronomers sift through endless noise. It began as a whisper, a faint irregularity in the raw data from the James Webb Space Telescope. A spectrographic line that shouldn't have been there. At first, a handful of astronomers thought it was a glitch, just bad pixels, nothing worth losing sleep over. But then the anomaly repeated, steady, rhythmic, precise. Too precise. It wasn't noise, it wasn't a flare, it wasn't anything we'd expect from nature. And the object producing this anomaly was already infamous. 3I Atlas. An interstellar body that had entered our solar system, not unlike Oumuamua in 2017 or Borisov in 2019. We thought we understood these objects. They arrive on wild, hyperbolic trajectories. They warm as they pass the sun. They shed water and dust, and then they vanish into the void. But Atlas refused to play by those rules. Unlike every comet we've catalogued in detail, it carried no water signature. None. Imagine that. An object warmed by the sun, yet refusing to grow the halo of vapor we expect. No coma. No dusty tail. Instead, Webb and SPHEREx readings showed only carbon dioxide, in massive quantities. A solitary chemical fingerprint. A chemical monotone where nature usually sings in chords. Why is this strange? Because even the strangest comets in our solar system carry multiple volatiles. Water, carbon monoxide, methane, dust. Always a mixture. But Atlas displayed a purity no natural body should. CO2 only. It was like opening a time capsule and finding a single page where there should have been a library. NASA quietly pointed SPHEREx's infrared spectrometer at it, expecting to find hidden traces of water or carbon monoxide. Nothing. Just CO2. A chemical profile unprecedented in all of recorded astronomy. Now, to be clear, science thrives on anomalies. When we encounter the unexpected, we dig deeper. But what unsettled many was not just the chemistry, it was the scale. Initial measurements underestimated Atlas, but leaked Webb data revealed the object was colossal, around 46 kilometers across. To put that in perspective, Oumuamua, the object Avi Loeb made headlines for, suggesting might be artificial, was no more than a few hundred meters long. Borisov was a few kilometers, but Atlas, 46 kilometers. A mountain adrift in interstellar space. The odds of something that massive arriving here by chance are vanishingly small. And then came the symmetry. Webb's infrared imaging revealed a perfectly balanced halo of CO2 extending hundreds of thousands of kilometers, radiating outward like a geometric shell. Real comets do not behave this way. They produce asymmetrical jets, chaotic tails that bend under solar wind. Atlas's halo, however, was eerily smooth, like a veil deliberately arranged. The deeper astronomers dug, the more the data defied them. The glow around Atlas was not sunlight reflected off rock and ice. It had internal origins. The object itself was shining, its emissions structured, repeating, bearing resemblance to engineered photonic systems. To those who studied telecommunications, the signal looked like data transfer, not geology. Imagine Morse code but written in infrared across the void. As if size and chemistry weren't enough, the object's path raised even sharper eyebrows. Interstellar visitors usually cut across our solar system at odd angles, pulled along by gravitational slingshots, tumbling chaotically. But Atlas's trajectory slid into perfect alignment with the orbital plane of the planets. A 1 in 500 probability. Imagine tossing a dart blindfolded across a city and hitting the bullseye of a dartboard you can't even see. That is the level of improbability we're facing. It skimmed past multiple worlds, including Earth, before curving deeper into the system, like a drone following a flight plan. Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb, controversial yet unafraid, called the trajectory technologically suggestive. He noted how Atlas positioned itself to optimize observations by Earth-based telescopes, as though it wanted to be noticed, but not completely understood. And where did it come from? Its path traces back to the Sagittarius constellation, the very region of sky where the famous WOW signal erupted in 1977. That one burst of radio energy remains one of the most tantalizing, unexplained signals ever recorded. The possibility that two of the strangest cosmic events in history trace back to the same region? It makes you pause. Now, theories began to swirl. The most compelling and unsettling wasn't science fiction, but science fact, applied differently. What if Atlas was not a comet or asteroid at all, but something engineered? Imagine a massive asteroid mined out and retrofitted with machinery, its rocky shell shielding an interior habitat or propulsion system. Scientists here on Earth have long proposed asteroid ships as feasible for interstellar travel. The rock protects from cosmic radiation. The hollowed interior houses engines and sensors. Outwardly, it looks natural, unless you study it with instruments sharp enough to peel away the disguise. Webb and SPHEREx may have done just that. The CO2 halo could be camouflage, a kind of exhaust designed to mimic cometary activity while concealing the true nature beneath. The internal glow could be power systems bleeding light. The prime number pulses could be communication or a test broadcast. If so, then 3i/Atlas may not just be visiting, it may be here on assignment. The implications stagger the imagination. If it is artificial, someone or something sent it. Across interstellar, perhaps even intergalactic distances. That means technology advanced enough to survive for thousands, maybe millions of years, traveling silently through the void until arriving here. And yet, perhaps the most chilling realization wasn't about chemistry, size, or even emissions. It was about perspective. When we first studied Atlas, we thought we were observing it. But with the discovery of repeating signals, with the pauses between bursts, with its precise trajectory, a new question rose like a shadow over every observatory. What if it is observing us? That is where the story shifts, from curiosity to unease, from wonder to a prickling awareness that we may not be alone in this conversation. that 3I/Atlas might not simply be passing through, but watching, listening, and waiting. This is the moment that turned scientists into reluctant whisperers, that silenced press briefings, that drew the military into urgent meetings. An object that refuses our categories is one thing, but an object that seems to watch back, that is something else entirely. And it is only the beginning. So as we continue our journey tonight, hold on to this thought. What happens when the observer becomes the observed? If Atlas is indeed what the evidence suggests, something vast, deliberate, and aware, then humanity's place in the cosmos has just shifted, forever. Stay with me. This is only part 1 of the story. Subscribe, and let's continue this journey together, because we are not merely stargazers tonight. We are participants in a dialogue we barely understand. When I first read the leaked spectrograms from Webb, I expected noise. That's usually how these stories end. Glitches in data streams, miscalibrations, illusions born from the complexity of instruments more sensitive than anything humanity has ever built. But what I saw instead was order. Not chaotic spikes, not random fluctuations, but precise intervals. A rhythm. At first glance, the pulses looked like flickering, the kind you'd expect from a tumbling rock, reflecting sunlight as it rotates. But Webb's NIR SPEC and MIRI instruments are not fooled by tricks of light. When the data was decomposed spectrally, the flickers became unmistakable sequences. They repeated in intervals that aligned with prime numbers: 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. The exact kind of mathematical language SETI researchers have long argued would be universal for contact. Now imagine that. A rock 46 kilometers across, wrapped in a perfectly symmetrical carbon dioxide halo, pulsing mathematical signals across the void. A cosmic lighthouse, shining not to guide ships, but to announce its own intelligence. Each cycle ended with something even more unnerving: a silence. A long gap, as though the object itself had paused, waiting for an answer. It wasn't just speaking, it seemed to be listening. NASA's internal response was swift and absolute. Observatories were told to stand down, data channels went dark. The message to the public was silence. The message to those inside the system was clearer still. This object is no longer just a scientific curiosity. It is a matter of security. That silence was broken only by the leaks. Anonymous analysts, quiet conversations with journalists, fragments of classified memos. And what emerged from those leaks was a pattern that went beyond curiosity and into dread. Soon after Webb's observations, the Deep Space Network began experiencing failures. At first, engineers explained it away: solar interference, coronal activity. But when Voyager 2, New Horizons, and even Long Idle probes fell silent in synchrony, the timing was impossible to ignore. The outages lined up almost perfectly with the Webb observation windows. For those of us watching closely, it raised a terrifying question. Was 3I Atlas reacting to being observed? Think about that. Our most powerful telescope locks onto it, and within hours, probes across the outer solar system go quiet. Coincidence? Or a defense mechanism? A cloaking response? A warning? If it can interrupt communications from Voyager, then perhaps it can control what we see and what we cannot. As these anomalies stacked up, I began to hear whispers about new military directives. NASA's satellite redirection logs, usually routine and dull, spiked with activity. Satellites weren't just being recalibrated, they were being repositioned, rerouted under orders from NORAD and the US Space Force. Within 48 hours of the Webb leak, the X-37B spaceplane, a craft whose missions are always shrouded in secrecy, was launched on an unannounced trajectory. Orbital reconstructions suggested line-of-sight capability toward Atlas's projected path. Why mobilize a classified military platform in response to a supposed comet? Were they watching it or preparing to engage it? We don't know. But what we do know is that defense briefings began to label 3I Atlas with a chilling new classification: technological unknowns of extraterrestrial origin. In other words, this was no longer just science. It was strategy. As the military scrambled, the scientists dug deeper. A daring group of astrobiologists began advancing a theory so radical it would have been dismissed as fringe just a few years ago. What if 3I Atlas wasn't just a probe, but something alive? Not biological life as we know it, but biomechanical synthesis, a hybrid of machine and organism, an intelligence grown around metal scaffolds, armored against radiation, powered by solar and cosmic energy, and capable of evolving on interstellar timescales. Not built by hands, but grown by intention. This idea has circulated in speculative astrobiology circles for decades. Could intelligence evolve not in cells but in alloys? Could machine and biology merge into a system capable of surviving deep time and deep space? If so, then Atlas may not have been sent. It may have sent itself. Autonomous. Adaptive. And now here, choosing to pause in our system, choosing to emit signals, choosing to watch us. Signals that, according to leaked web logs, began to change. What was once a steady prime number sequence began to evolve, shifting patterns, cycling through phases. Some analysts described it as a sequence of 5 stages, with the current emissions marking stage 3. If the models are right, the final stage will coincide with Atlas's alignment between Earth and Mars in just months. What would happen then? A transmission? A transformation? A rendezvous? No one can say. Meanwhile, orbital data grew stranger still. Atlas was no longer following the expected gravitational arc. Instead, it made sharp course corrections, non-ballistic maneuvers that defied every model. Caltech simulations ruled out gravitational assists, solar perturbations, and thermal outgassing. The precision of the changes could only be described as intentional. On July 4th, a maneuver aligned Atlas with Luyten's star, a red dwarf system 12 light-years away, known to host at least one potentially habitable exoplanet. Coincidence? Or a clue? If Atlas knew its route, if it aligned itself deliberately, then perhaps this is not the first time it has crossed our solar system. Perhaps it is one node in a much larger circuit. And then, the leak that chilled me most, the discovery of a countdown embedded in the infrared pulses. Analysts, working in secret, decoded waveform structures that resolved into the phrase, "Countdown initialized, 283 Earth days remaining." This wasn't a NASA-generated note. It wasn't a human annotation. It came from the object itself. The immediate scramble was to correlate the countdown with known events. Solar maximum, Mars-Earth alignment, orbital crossing, none fit cleanly, until someone noticed the cadence. Oumuamua in 2017, Borisov in 2019, now Atlas in 2025. Roughly every 7 years another object, each more complex than the last, each closer to Earth. The pattern was undeniable. This wasn't random arrival. This was sequence. Atlas wasn't phase 1, it was phase 3, and if there are phases, there will be a final act. It is here that science collides with something larger: philosophy, fear, and wonder. If this countdown is real, what is it counting toward? An arrival? A transformation? A message? Or something even darker? And just as scientists debated this, another anomaly surfaced. Analysts reported that fragments of the pulse frequencies mirrored DNA-like structures, helix motifs found in genetic regulation, human-compatible motifs. Could it be coincidence? Mathematical pareidolia? Or was the object broadcasting not just math, but biology? Broadcasting not just to us, but about us? If true, it would mean Atlas knows life here intimately, because it has seen it before. Or worse, because it helped spark it. That theory spread like wildfire in astrobiological circles, but before it could ignite in public, the hammer fell. Federal agencies issued cease and desist orders, papers were halted, labs silenced. The official reason? National security concerns over satellite spoofing. Everyone inside the field knew better. This wasn't foreign interference. This was interstellar. And yet, despite suppression, one line from the leaked memo burned itself into memory. Countdown initialized. As I sit here speaking to you, that clock ticks. 283 days, shrinking with every rotation of our Earth. And none of us know what waits at 0. The observers are not silent anymore, and whether we are ready or not, the conversation has begun. I remember the first time I saw the residual signal buried in Webb's noise. It wasn't supposed to be there. The object had already passed behind the sun, fading from direct observation, and yet the detectors still carried a ghost, a faint emission near the hydrogen line, repeating with precision, once every 12 hours and 3 minutes. Too regular to be random, too close to Earth's own magnetic resonance to ignore. For weeks, astronomers cross-referenced it against older records. And then came the revelation that stopped me cold. Voyager 1 had recorded this exact pattern in 1996 as it crossed the heliopause. At the time, it was dismissed as static, but when analyzed with modern tools, it aligned perfectly with 3I Atlas's current emissions. The implication was staggering. This wasn't our first encounter. We had seen it before, decades ago, only we didn't recognize it. And now, as the signals grow stronger, it feels less like a coincidence and more like a return. The next layer of analysis was even more chilling. A Webb spectrogram of Atlas's core emissions looked like chaos at first. Random bursts, warped radiation, scatter in every band. But one engineer, thinking outside the box, converted the data into polar coordinates and overlaid it with Gaia star maps. The bursts aligned into a pattern. A star map, not of our solar neighborhood, but of the Triangulum galaxy, 2.7 million light-years away. And at the end of the sequence, the map looped back to Earth. Not a wandering fragment then, a messenger, a traveler, a calculated arrival. If this were only about trajectories and star maps, perhaps it would be thrilling rather than ominous. But Webb's data revealed one more anomaly: the shadow. Analysts initially thought it was dust trailing behind the body, but enhancement showed something unnatural: a perfectly linear shadow cast across the infrared field, unaffected by sunlight or angles. It followed Atlas wherever it moved. Internal documents leaked later called it a self-shading body. That phrase has never appeared in any scientific literature, but its meaning was obvious. Atlas was not just blocking light, it was manipulating it, projecting its own shadow, independent of physics as we know them. To do that would mean bending light, bending space. And what if that manipulation wasn't just camouflage, but communication? What if its shadow was part of the message? Weeks passed. Observatories turned elsewhere. NASA issued no statements. But inside ESA, NASA, and SETI, private conversations grew urgent. Some began to whisper that Atlas was not a ship, not even a probe, but a thought. A thought, a non-biological intelligence encoded in structure and radiation, a mind without neurons. It doesn't need propulsion because it shapes gravity itself. It doesn't need optics because entanglement allows it to perceive systems across time. It doesn't send words. It arranges patterns of light, maps, shadows. It is not speaking in ways we understand. It is thinking, and we are standing in its path. If this is true, then the James Webb Space Telescope did more than observe it. Webb triggered it. By locking its gaze, by interrogating the signals, we became part of the pattern. We became the observed. And that raises the most chilling possibility of all. Atlas may not be the only one. Think back. 1977, the WOW signal from Sagittarius. 2017, Oumuamua. 2019, Borisov. Now Atlas in 2025. Roughly every 7 years, a new visitor, each more complex, each closer to Earth. This may be a sequence, a process spanning decades, maybe centuries. Atlas is not alone. It is part of a system. And if the leaked countdown is to be believed, something else is coming. Because that phrase still echoes. Countdown initialized. 283 Earth days remaining. What does it count down to? An arrival? A signal dispatch? A transformation? We cannot say. But the military is preparing. The silence from NASA and ESA is not because they don't know, but because they know too much. And yet, while agencies classify and control, whispers continue to leak. Some researchers claim that fragments of the pulse patterns resemble DNA motifs, helix-turn-helix structures like those in human gene regulation. If true, then Atlas's message is not only mathematical, but biological. Not only, we are here, but we know you. Could it be coincidence? A trick of translation? Maybe, but if not, then this object carries knowledge of Earth it should not have. Knowledge of us. At this point, the conversation shifts from science into philosophy. What if intelligence is not rare, but fragile? What if civilizations rise, burn, and collapse, leaving behind only their minds encoded in structures, drifting as signals across galaxies? If Atlas is such a remnant, then it is not a visitor, it is a survivor, a refugee. But survivors do not travel without reason. And that brings us to risk. Let me be blunt. If Atlas can suppress the deep space network, it can interfere with satellites, probes, even future Mars missions. If it is adaptive, it could learn from our responses, evolve to bypass our defenses. And if its countdown ends in transformation, something that changes its trajectory toward Earth, then every probe, every satellite, every planet in its path could be at risk. This is why the X-37B was launched, why ESA satellites quietly shifted, why SpaceX, normally loud about every mission, has fallen silent about certain launches. Behind closed doors, we are preparing. Preparing for what, we cannot say. And in that silence, society fractures. Some demand disclosure. Science, not silence, has become a rallying cry. Others argue secrecy is essential, that panic could be more dangerous than the object itself. Leaks fuel conspiracy. Censorship fuels mistrust. The truth is locked in a box, and we are left to argue in the dark. But philosophy cuts deeper still. If Atlas is a mind, a true intelligence, then what is it teaching us? Perhaps that intelligence itself can go extinct, leaving only ghosts encoded in stone and light. Perhaps that survival does not mean thriving, only persisting. And perhaps the lesson is that if we wish to avoid the same fate, we must prepare not just technologically, but spiritually, for resilience, for humility, for perspective. Because whether Atlas is probe, ship, or thought, it forces us to see ourselves, fragile, curious, standing on the shore of a cosmic ocean, staring at a wave rising from the deep. I do not know what will happen when the countdown ends. None of us do. But I know this: the universe has just handed us a mirror, and in that reflection, we must decide who we are and who we wish to be. This is no longer simply about astronomy. It is about identity, humanity's role in the cosmos, and the clock is still ticking. After months of piecing together fragments of data, leaks, and whispers from within NASA, ESA, and SETI, one truth rises above all else. 3I Atlas is not what we thought. It is larger than we imagined, stranger in its chemistry, deliberate in its path, and structured in its signals. It has broken the cometary script, and in doing so, forced us to confront a possibility we have always feared and always longed for, that we are not alone, and never have been. Yet what unsettles me most is not the science, but the silence. The sudden lockdown of Webb's data, the quiet satellite redirections, the military's swift involvement, all speak of a truth too large to hide, but too disruptive to release. And that leaves us, the public, in the most human of positions, staring at the sky, asking questions no one will answer. Perhaps 3I Atlas is only a messenger, mapping galaxies and leaving behind whispers in light. Perhaps it is a biomechanical survivor, drifting across star systems as a thought encoded in matter. Or perhaps, in the cruelest twist, it is a mirror, showing us what intelligence becomes when it outlives its world, leaving only shadows to travel the void. But whatever it is, we cannot deny its presence. The countdown pulses, the map has been drawn, the silence between bursts waits for a reply. So I leave you with this. When intelligence meets intelligence across the abyss of space, what should humanity's first response be? Silence, caution, or welcome? Subscribe so we can continue this cosmic journey together, because the universe has spoken, and whether in fear or wonder, it is finally our turn to answer.